Hey everybody, welcome to episode 48 of Pealed Back's LiveCast Conversations with, as always, I'm your host, Gene Bernier, the Enjoyment Coach. With me today is Mark Gordon. Mark has been involved in faith, business, and community leadership, family coaching, and a keynote speaker for more than 30 years. His passion for people is evident whether speaking, writing, or coaching. He is passionate to inspire and empower people, families, and organizations to become relational, emotional, and spiritually healthy. He has recently released the book called Relationships Matter, and an essential blueprint to building strong families and fostering healthy relationships. I've read this book. It is great. If you haven't got it, go get it. We'll post the link down below. Well, Mark always says, my greatest accomplishment is my family. Being married to my amazing wife, Sandi, for 38 years. I'm blessed to have three amazing children who are married to three more amazing people. And of course, my greatest joy is his two beautiful grandchildren. Mark, my words can only do you so much justice. Thank you so much, sir.
No, it's awesome. It's so good to be with you, Gene. And I've sure appreciated our friendship and our relationship. So,
and I believe it's like thanks to Licky for us connecting as well.
Yeah. I think it was Licky that the Blind Spot group there that introduced us. But and then we found out we were in the same town, and so we were able to get to know each other. And I just really enjoy. I'm also part of the Open Forum Conversation Fridays, and I just love that. It's been great. Really encourage people to jump in on that one too. So.
Well, we always appreciate you being part of that too. It's been a lot of fun seeing that little group grow over the last 4 or 5 months now. So definitely Open Forum again, something else brought to you by Pealed Back. So I'll end the advertisement.
Awesome.
So Mark, tell us a little bit about your journey. So obviously you're an author, you're a speaker, a keynote, and a coach. Tell us a little bit about what drove you down to being, talking about relationships and the foundations that build those strong relationships.
Yeah. So in my life, I grew up in a family that was very religious, very, follow the direction. Like, you follow the orders handed down from above as closely as you can. And so there was, it was a really interesting way to grow up, but there was no room for expression or thinking out loud or being able to relate to anybody, because you just had to follow the line, right? And so at some point in time, I began to push back against that. And I started to kind of rebel, if you will, against that whole concept. And so at 13, I ran away from home. 14, picked up, taken back. 14, 15, finally left for good at 15 years old. And of course, through bad decisions in my life and through that anger that came from all of that, I was actually not a great guy. And I got into drug addiction and all kinds of problems in my life. And I met my wife, and got her pregnant almost right away. I didn't know if I loved her or not, but there was something in me that said I needed to do the right thing. And so I married her. Mr. Romantic here on a phone call when she told me she was pregnant. Well, I guess we should get married then. Do what I don't do, and you're going to have great relationships. Anyway, but through my life, what I saw that was a pattern was broken relationships. I couldn't seem to get along with anybody. I never felt, connected. And I had this massive fear of failure because of it. And so I think I sabotaged relationships and sabotaged anything that looked like it might be good for me. And so out of that healing journey, my wife and I had a very difficult first couple of years because of my addiction and because of that anger. And at some point in time, we hit bottom. And my son was born, and he was about 2, maybe a little bit older. And my wife, I got offered a job in another province, and so I moved, and my wife had decided not to go with me. I had dropped my son off, anticipating she was coming in halfway with my parents, and found myself here now, my family blown apart, not knowing what I'm going to do. And I had a total crisis of life in that moment. And in that moment, for me, I came to a faith that was beyond the religion, the religious stuff. I came to a faith, and actually, when I hit bottom, I cried out for help to the God I thought I knew, and discovered the one I do know now. And so, in that healing journey, I discovered the value of relationship. So it started with faith. That I realized that it was actually not religion; it was relationship. And so it started there. And then I started realizing I needed to heal the relationships that I had currently destroyed. And so it started with my wife, and very happy to say it's a dramatic story, but to give you the cliff notes, we ended up kind of making that faith decision 1,000 kilometers apart at the same day and the same morning, and decided to try again with our marriage. And so we came together and we went through the healing journey together, which is why I can say today we've been married 38 years. We learned how to love each other. We learned how to relate to each other. Now we're still learning. there's not really an arrival date or an expiry date, and that's the thing. There's only an expiry date if you make it expire. So, so anyway, along our healing journey, I discovered some of these principles and some of these things that were really valuable in my life to me, and things that people had invested in me, and some epiphanies that came to me and helped me in my life. And I came to a place where I realized I needed to share that. And I had a responsibility. To much you is given, you have a responsibility to give that away, right? So if you've received much, you should give much. And so I started to live by that thing. And it started off as just starting a youth center, and that's way too long of a story, but we started helping young people that were in crisis. And from there, it just grew and developed. And so for the last 30 years, I've been serving in different capacities with nonprofits and faith groups, including local church. And I just, in the last little while during COVID, lost my salary. I was laid off, like many people were. And I came to this place of saying, maybe it's time for the next level. Maybe I needed to start a formal coaching training business and take these principles and really hone them in and deliver them. And so that's what I do now. I get the honor and privilege of helping people develop healthy relational culture in their families, and also for organizations and businesses. And so that's kind of what I do now.
That's incredible, Mark. And thank you so much. I just want to, give you a moment of praise for being so open and vulnerable with us by sharing that whole story, right? There's a lot to it, and I met lots between it all. Some of the things that stood out to me is, like, you talked about anger, and then you talked about resolving those relationships. So could you maybe lean into a little bit about how, resolving the anger and resolving the relationship are, I think those things have to be hand in hand a little bit. And
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because I think that I often say relationships are the greatest source of joy or the greatest source of pain, depending on how they're going. Yeah. And so I realized that anger was a secondary emotion. It's not a first response. It's actually an outcome. And so it begged me to ask the question, what is the cause if anger is the effect? And as I started to look into that and realized that my anger wasn't because somebody made me angry in a moment necessarily. It's because they triggered something inside me that was broken. I had this fear of failure, for example, that created a wall around my heart. I often say, we put walls up around our heart to protect who we are. There's a few things I teach in my stuff, and here's one of my philosophies that will help answer your question. I believe, because we're created in God's image, that we have a few inherent things. Everybody wants to love and be loved, right? Because when we're loved, that's where we find significance. So everybody wants to love and be loved. Everybody has gifts and abilities. We've all been given gifts and abilities, and I actually believe gifts and abilities are to be used to send, express, and receive love. But we also have hopes and dreams. I don't know a person who was born without developing hopes and dreams. I know lots of people who have had their gifts and abilities and their hopes and dreams smothered, but they're still there, right? And then the last one is the desire to succeed. I think we need to redefine what success is, I believe it's doing the best you can with what you have. But we've often in our world have said it's bigger houses, bigger cars, more money, fame, fortune. We think that that's success, and that's not success. Success is doing the best you can with what you have. And so based on that, what happens is that part of us is the most sensitive part of us because it's where our identity is. It's where our value comes from.
Yeah.
If we feel loved and we are able to love others, then we feel valued. You see, I didn't feel loved. I felt like I could never measure up. In fact, I felt like I was a mistake. In fact, I was told I was an accident, that I was a mistake. Sometimes it was jokes, but those jokes hit home. I started to believe the message. And so what happened was is I had to put walls up around my heart that protected that part of me, that part that had hopes and dreams, that part that had gifts and abilities, that part that wanted to succeed and love well. I put walls up around it. The two primary walls people put up is one is fear and one is a defense. So my fear of failure caused my defense wall to go up, which was to act better than I was, to try and put a persona out there that I was successful or that I was able to do things. I remember as a teenager, I would tell tall tales about successes I had. If somebody said, "Oh, I love that song on the radio," I'd say, "Oh, I co-wrote that."
Just make it up as you were going.
Made it up as I went along, right? Because I was so desperate to be affirmed. I was so desperate to have someone say to me that I had value. And so what would happen, of course, if somebody said, BS, they called me out on it, I would go into a rage. I'd go into anger, would be triggered, because if anybody got too close to that failure, I didn't want them to see it. So I would push back before they had a chance. That was my defense.
Yeah.
Now, that fear and defense causes relational breaches. It's hard for us. Picture it this way. My wife's fear was rejection because she faced a lot of rejection in her early life. And her defense to that was to hold everybody at bay, to push everybody away from her. So she did it through meanness and, being gnarly, being
Yeah.
Well, guess what? My fear would be triggered by her defense.
Yeah.
And my defense. So now let's talk about a relationship where we're coming to be intimately, emotionally intimate. Emotionally intimate. We want to have a connection that is deep emotionally. But all I can ever do is hit those walls, and it causes it difficult to develop that relationship. So what I had to learn was in my healing journey is that my anger was affecting the relationships around me because I was trying to defend against this thing that I had inside me. It wasn't even true. The fact was I was valuable. The fact was I was successful. I wasn't a failure. I wasn't dumb like I supposed. I wasn't all these tricks of the mind, right? Oh, this battleground up here. I wasn't actually those things. And so what turned out to be significant for my healing was as soon as I realized that and I allowed that person, the thing is, even though I was behind the walls, was the person still there? Yeah. That person who was of value, who loved and wanted and could love, had the capacity to love and be loved, that person with the gifts and abilities, the hopes and dreams and all of that was still there. And so when I surrendered those negative, fearful thoughts and I started to adapt that more the truth that I was valuable, that I was an encourager, that I was able to have a healthy relationship, what happened is I started to see the cause and effect go. The anger started to diminish. See, I often say you look where you walk. When I'm helping guys that are in recovery, I say if you continue to look at the addiction as a problem and you try and fix the addiction, you're going to keep going in the relapse cycle. But if you look beyond the addiction and say, what's my purpose in life? Where do I want to go in life? Then as you're going on that journey and addiction comes with temptation, you say, no, get out of my way. I'm heading over here.
Yeah.
And so you start to walk where you're looking. And so what I had to do is start looking at healthy relationships, that I was capable of them, that I could contribute to them. And as I did that, I started to see these things come to pass. I started to see, so then some people have asked me, well, then if you take the walls down, because only I can, somebody can't take them down for me. As I took the walls down, how do you protect your heart? There's an old proverb that says that to protect your heart is the source of all life. So how do I protect myself then? If I'm, well, what I discovered was there's principles or values in life that you can apply to your life that will protect your heart without the walls. I
Love it.
found out that I could put boundaries up on relationships that would protect the relationship instead of walls around my heart and destroy the relationship. And so as I started learning those principles, I started to make notes on them. I started teaching on them, and the book is a result, right?
Well, that is so powerful. Is stripping that down and realizing it's not the walls that are really doing the protecting. It's if you can step into it, and it's almost like switch it around to like the boundaries are based on the values and how you want to show up, and anything that comes at you, that then you have this powerful choice of going, how am I going to show up to this? Am I going to show up with my defenses up? Like when we get into that state, it's like almost the best offense is a strong defense, which is like
Right.
never the case, right? And you're, instead of firing everything you've got at what's coming at you, you let it in, and you can learn
Right.
from it. And you choose to be like, look, you can't get me.
Yeah.
I'm not going to get this moment that power, and here's where I'm going.
Exactly. You see that those moments as opportunities instead of attacks.
Yeah.
And you can respond to them. See, part of the problem with the, with the walls is that it creates blind spots for us, right? That's Licky's teaching, right? About the blind spots. That we develop these blind spots that where we don't actually see, we don't actually see what we're doing. See, I wasn't aware of the relational messages I was sending to my wife. I didn't realize how much damage I was doing and how much hurtful I was. But until I discovered that about myself and I was able to release it, all of a sudden things started coming in view, and I realized my tendencies, and I started to see the cause and effect. And as soon as I started changing the causes, the effects took care of themselves. I didn't have to work on not being angry. The anger just left.
Yeah.
I didn't have to work on defending myself. I didn't feel like I had to. So my initial thought sometimes when people were challenging me was like, hey, they're trying to make me look bad. I got to get them before they get me. Change to, if somebody's now coming at me, my first question is, I wonder what's going on in their life that they're feeling threatened. Like, I actually take a, how can I help approach to it instead of like getting all defensive, right?
And as well, like when you're in that ability to not be defensive, be like, it's like, what are they seeing that I'm not?
Yeah.
Because we're constantly having blind spots, and like I'll put Licky's BS comment back up here
This
again.
quote,
Is
yeah,
his
there
quote there is, like, no matter how much work we do, is like, if we're out constantly doing the work, like you talked about earlier, there is no end point. And we have this blind spot. So think we've got like 360-degree view. We only can see 270. And as we turn, there's always going to be something that's being blocked or something that's out of view. So being aware of that, going, ooh, could that be something out of view? Or are they hurting? Are they like, what are they feeling right now? And where is that coming from? Versus like, I'm going to get you. Ooh, that's
right.
Oh, you want to see anger? I'll show you anger. Let's go. Like, and that's something that I can relate to that, and learn, still in that process, still doing the work of like disarming that and getting okay with it, because what is it really at the end of the day? It's a message. All the emotions are a message. Are we going, hey, what are we actually supposed to be hearing right now? Be like, warning, red lights. Oh my God, we're in danger. We're not being chased by saber-toothed tigers anymore. So what is the real danger? What is the real warning? The real warning is something needs to be addressed, an expectation, maybe a little bit of gentleness on ourselves need to be deployed.
Yeah. Yeah. You see that the thing is, when we react, a lot of times so psychologists say that we process things. You'll have a feeling, then you'll have a thought about that feeling, and then you have a behavior that comes from that thought. So if I feel rejected, my thought is they're rejecting me, I need to reject them before they reject me. Then my behavior is going to be one that I'm rejecting them, I'm pushing them away. The problem is that when we deal with people in conflict, we tend to want to deal with the behavior instead of backing up and dealing with the feeling. If I can discover what my wife was feeling the moment she got angry at me and said something mean, then I can actually go back and say, honey, what were you feeling there? How tell me how you were feeling. Well, I just feel like you broke a promise and it made me feel bad, right? And then now I can deal with that and say, oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to do that. And so the problem is we're always trying to deal with the behavior, and fighting behavior will only escalate. I call it climbing the anger ladder. You say something, right? I react,
Yeah.
and you have to push back, and I got to react, and so on and so forth. And we climb that anger ladder, and it hurts the relationship. And so if we can understand this process, if I can deal at the feeling level first, and how I change my feelings, by the way, is by changing my thoughts. So that's why I said now when somebody comes at me, my thought isn't I'm being attacked. My thought is, oh, they must be in pain. How can I help? And it puts me in a much better position. Even if it was something I did wrong,
Yeah.
I can take responsibility for it and say, you know what, it's okay. I can take responsibility for this. That wasn't the relational message I wanted to send to you. And so it just so much more freedom in life when you can journey in this way. You see, the thing, Gene, is that everything flows out of relationship. I don't think people think about this, but even your own life, you have to relate to yourself first. And if you can't relate to yourself, how are you going to relate to others?
Yeah.
You think about it, when I say things like relationship or relational intimacy, is right away people think family, wives, husband, spouse, partner. They might think kids. They might think, but you know what? You have relationships at work. You have relationships in your neighborhood. You have relationship with friends. You have relationship. Everything flows out of relationship.
Yeah.
There isn't anything in this life. I said to somebody, I think it's at the beginning of the book, if you remember, I said, even if you were on the side of the mountain and you didn't have anybody else there, you still have to relate to the land. You have to relate to the environment around you. You have to relate to the animals that are there.
Yeah.
So it's really important to understand, if everything flows out of relationship, then it behooves me to invest in relationships. It behooves me to actually realize, ooh, this isn't binary. I need to actually invest in this. I need to work at this. I need to learn how to relate, and I need to help others relate to me. I always tell people, teach others how to love you. Don't just expect them to know how. You have to teach them how to love you.
You mean we shouldn't all be mind readers?
Exactly.
But if I don't state my expectations, how can I hold that against you?
Right. Isn't that the way it is, though? That's what we do.
I say it with a cheekiness to all that, but it is so true. And like,
it is so true.
Well, what if you ask for something?
Yeah.
And they don't respond properly? Like,
right.
Well, that's again, that's a conversation. That's a place to grow and to develop from, right? Right. From your story from the beginning, is like you and your wife went through some really rocky things, and now you're celebrating your 38. You just celebrated your 38th wedding anniversary.
Yeah.
Is like, well, there is a path through this, and it doesn't necessarily mean that it's an opportunity to put that relationship to the side or to end it. Now that's within reality. Like sometimes that is the right course, right? Like hopefully somebody doesn't listen to that and go, oh my God, I got to stay in a horrible, shitty relationship. Like, no.
I always say, don't hear what I'm not saying, right?
Yeah.
So, but that's true if there's abuse or there's whatever. But I do tell a lot of people, it's a lot less to invest in a relationship, invest in coaching or counseling, to invest in really working hard. But you have to have, like, both parties have to be working at that. Yeah. But it's a lot cheaper to do that than it is to get a divorce.
Much cheaper.
And the emotional cost of it is that you carry sometimes the pain from the past relationship into the next relationship. And so there's a lot of healing work that needs to take place to prepare you for the next one, so that you don't repeat the cycle. Right. How many times have we heard that, where people just repeat the same mistakes, the same trouble? The reason for that is because you have to do the intentional healing and the intentional work on your own heart to learn how to relate to yourself, so that you can then you have boundaries that you will only be related to in certain ways that you can set and stand with. And so that's why it's so important not to just walk away into the next one, but to actually work on that relationship.
Oh, I agree. And it's a quote I heard about boundaries in the last little while that's really stuck out is like, I'm not setting boundaries to push you away. I'm setting boundaries to be able to keep you a part of my life.
Yeah.
And I
Let
thought
me,
that was just a very powerful
it
reframe
is.
for it.
Well, I'll give you an example. My at one point, my sister was estranged from me. She wouldn't talk to me. We had a falling out of sorts with her husband and her and I, and it was a very painful time for them and for me. But I remember thinking at one point in time, I said, you know what? I forgive her. I, forgiveness is going to protect my heart. I don't want to carry bitterness around. I don't want to
Yeah.
carry anger around. So I I likened it to this. I put this forgiveness in a nice little box with a bow, and that forgiveness is for her when she's ready to receive it. But I'm going to put a boundary up because I'm not going to continue to get these mean emails and these accusations that weren't true against me, because what that was doing was harming our relationship.
Yeah.
So I have this gift of forgiveness for her when she's ready for it. But in the meantime, I need to preserve our future relationship. I need to preserve, I want to work towards the opportunity to present this gift of forgiveness to her. And in order to do that, I need to put boundaries up.
Yeah.
So for a few years, we had no contact because it just wasn't her. It was, I was trying to preserve our relationship. And it makes no sense. For most people, they're like, what? That's ridiculous. No, I was preserving our relationship because I had already decided to forgive. I had no animosity towards her. I understood that this was a cause and effect situation in her own life, and that I was going to walk in grace.
Yeah.
And so, because I did that, when the time came that her husband actually had passed away, and I stepped up right away and I facilitated the funeral. I let them use the building that I had a connection with a building they could use. I got some women together to do the meal, and I just served her in
Yeah.
that scenario. And our relationship today is restored
Beautiful.
completely because of that. But if I had not put the boundary up, if I had allowed the anger to continue climbing the ladder, we would never have come to that place.
Yeah. Well, I think like I hear that is like, it's like you chose the metaphor that works in my mind right at the moment off that is like, it's like when we're doing anger or we're doing things in that anger ladder is like we're basically just taking more credit out, more credit out, more credit out. And
Yeah.
we all know when we get ourselves into a credit crunch,
Yeah.
how long that actually takes to pay back off and to get
Yeah.
back just to zero,
Yeah.
not talking about building wealth. So how are
Yeah.
we taking those opportunities to not get in the hole in our relationships and to be in a
Right.
position to build a wealth of a relationship?
Right. And in fact, I use that illustration in the book because the first section of the book is the 5 pillars of a healthy relationship, right? And the first one's trust. And I liken it to trust equity. You
Yeah.
need to build trust equity in your relationship. And it's the same illustration. It's a bank account. If you're only ever making withdrawals, you'll end up going bankrupt and you won't have any trust left to be able to apply when you do mess up.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're making deposits, and you have to understand, you're making deposits and withdrawals every day, whether you know you are or not. That's why the intentional investment needs to come into play.
Yeah.
I'm not going to see money fall into my account in my bank accidentally. I have to make a deposit. If I need something to purchase something, I can't just wish it and it's going to drop from the sky and land in my house. I have to go out and purchase it.
Yeah.
So in the same way, relationships need intentional investment all the time. So every day you're making deposits and withdrawals. The question is, what you want to do to build wealth is to make more deposits than you do withdrawals. And that will create a healthy relationship. It's a
Love
pillar. It's
that.
a foundational pillar. Without trust, the relationship is going to be very difficult to get past. So, I go into how you build that trust and how you make those deposits, but we don't have time here for that today. You have to go buy the book.
You gotta go get the book. Go get the book. It explains it all. But I love the fact that you added that component of like the transactions are happening automatically already, but so that means you have to add that extra layer of intention to be like,
Right.
I'm choosing to make this deposit. I'm choosing to do, how am I going to make a
Right.
deposit today? How am I going to make
Right.
a deposit today? And I just about caught myself saying, I'm going to make a big deposit. I don't know if that's the, I don't feel like that's the right. Be like, it's just a deposit. Like there's no monetary value
Right.
on it. Be like, basically, how many
Well,
deposits do you have in here
yeah.
versus
Well,
withdrawals? And they're all the same. Doesn't matter if it's a big show or a little show. So
well, and here's another thought, Gene. What does actually put automatic money into your account? It's compound interest.
yeah,
So it's the money you have invested into your bank, into your investments. It gives you a return on the investment, and you're not even thinking about it. It just keeps coming back in to the
yeah,
account. In the same way with trust, if you've intentionally made the little deposits and consistent with the little deposits, you are getting compound interest of trust equity. So that when you need it the most, because I still need it with my wife
yeah.
sometimes. I still mess up. I still blow it. I still
What?
send wrong relational messages. I know it's hard to believe. I've written a book about relationships and I still have relationships that are messed up.
Yeah.
That's what makes me an expert is that I've screwed it up so much that I've learned what not to do. So anyway, but it's true. I still have to make intentional deposits every day so that I have I'm stinking rich in trust with my wife. So when I do, the other thing that happens, by the way, when you're making intentional investments all the time, uh, I tend not to do the things that take trust withdrawals because my mind is framed in a way that I'm making investment in my marriage and my
Yeah.
in the relationships that I have. And because my mind is tuned that way, I tend to make less withdrawals because I'm more aware. Does that make sense?
Makes a
So
lot of sense.
and so that makes it a lot easier. And so I don't, in the beginning I had to work hard and I would, get angry more often and make withdrawals more often. But then it started being further and further apart, right? That I made a withdrawal. And then I started learning how to make deposits. And as I did that, little things like keeping your promises,
Yeah.
little things like you said you'd take the garbage out, take it out. Don't
Yeah.
leave it sitting there for a week. Now, people will say to me, that's silly. What's the big deal? It's just garbage. No, it's a promise. You said you would take it out. And so that's doing a withdrawal. Every moment it sits there past the moment you said you'd take
Yeah.
it out
Every
is a
time
withdrawal.
every
Yeah,
time she'd walk by and be like, "Oh, the garbage isn't out." Another one.
right.
Oh, it's still not out. Another one. And then all of a sudden, something little happens, and you've got nothing left in the bank, and
Yeah.
a big action happens because of it.
Well, have you ever had that with somebody? Like they're mad at you all of a sudden, you can't even figure out why? Like, what in the world did I? And it really usually has nothing to do with what they got mad at you about.
Yeah.
There's something beneath the surface. So you've always got to be looking beneath the surface
Yeah.
and understanding that every relationship has cause and effect. So if it's good, then there's a cause that's caused a good effect. So you've
Yeah.
done something well. So look at that. If it's bad, it means that you've made a mistake, that you need to work on something. You need to go make it right. I actually just made a LinkedIn post about that, saying yesterday, just saying how often we will lose our cool, maybe get frustrated, say something in that kind of meanly, and then we kind of just forget about it, and you move on with life, and you never really make it right.
Yeah.
All those little deposits will add up eventually, and you're not helping yourself in that. So one of the things I always said, the redeeming factor in my parenting was when I made a mistake with the kids relationally, I would always go back and take responsibility for my part and cancel out what I said in anger.
Yeah.
I wouldn't just leave it to chance. I wouldn't just, oh, it's all okay now. I would go back and say, Dad should not have said that to you, son. And I'm sorry that I did, because that's not who you are. I
Yeah.
want to make sure he knew that I believed in him, that he was a great kid. And so I
Yeah.
went back and made it right with him. I didn't just leave it hanging in the air that I had said he was a loser, or that he had made a
Yeah.
mistake, or you let me down, or whatever it was that I said in anger. I would go back and make it right. And in any relationship, whether it's at work or at home, that's a great principle to live by. If you've said something that, what I would say is like a curse over somebody, if you
Yeah.
said something mean or rude to somebody, don't just think because it went away, or the tension's not in the air anymore, that those words did not have an effect, because our words are very powerful.
Oh yes.
And so don't assume that they've just go away because it's no longer a problem.
Yeah.
They will add up. And that's what happened to me. That's why I had a fear of failure, because I was told over and over again, that I failed. Nobody actually, when I was growing up, said, "You're such a failure." But they said, "You failed at that. You failed at this. You didn't do this right. You didn't do that right." And
Right.
nobody ever came back to tell me, "Well, I was doing that out of my own frustration and anger. I'm sorry." Yeah.
No, it's
Sorry.
super powerful. Like it's
Yeah.
you know, my one of my sons gets frustrated with me now. He turns to me and just goes, "Oh, you make it so hard to be mad at you because you just keep owning your stuff." And I kind
Yeah.
of laugh, and we have a laugh to it, and it disarms the situation. But it is quite powerful to see how that can shift a relationship, and even like when you realize what you're doing and own it, and then just like
Yeah.
that energy dissipates, and the other side's left with like, I wanted to fight.
Yeah. See,
Damn
I have
it.
people I have people tell me all the time that if they're transparent, which is one of the ways you build trust, that it'll be used against them in some way because that's been their experience.
Yeah.
But true transparency actually protects your heart.
Yeah.
Because if everything's exposed, then how can it be used negatively?
Right.
Like, I already know that I'm struggling in this area. I've taken responsibility. So now I can't have it used against me because I know that that's not who I am.
Yeah.
I've separated it. You have to always, in your communication with, when you're relating to somebody, you got to separate behavior from personhood. A lot of times we don't do that. We will label somebody's personhood according to their behavior.
Right.
And that is dangerous to do. That will hurt a relationship. But if you can separate personhood from, so I'll give you an example. My son went through a phase in his teen years where he was, lying. he was lying to us about it because he didn't want to get caught in a few things, right?
Yeah.
And but I remember that I had a conversation with him finally about it, and I said, and I said something profound that I didn't mean to say. It just kind of came out of me. It was part of my healing. I was well on my healing journey, and I said, "Here's the thing, son: is you're not a liar. So why are you lying to me?" Ooh. Instead of saying, "You little liar,
Yeah.
you're always lying to me. You always lie. You never tell the truth." I said, "You're not a liar. So why are you lying to me?" I contrasted his personhood from his behavior.
Yeah.
And he thought about it for a minute and he was dumbfounded. And he said, "I don't know. I just don't want to disappoint you." Wow. That was his cause. He didn't want to
Yeah.
disappoint me. So he was lying about something. And I said to him, I said, "Son, first of all, you can't disappoint me. I love you. But
Yeah.
there are things that you do, decisions you make that aren't good for you. And so, yes, I want you to have," but I said, "if you're concerned about hurting me, lying to me hurts far more
Yeah.
than what you might have been trying to hide." And
Powerful.
it was a moment that was transformative for our relationship from that. And today he's 38, and he and I are not just son and father, we're good friends now. I always tell parents, if you want to be friends when they're adults, be parents when they're kids. If you try and be friends when they're kids, you will not be friends when they're adults.
Listen to this, parents. I say the exact same thing, and I get dirty looks sometimes. But it's
I
just like,
know.
I'm here to be your parent, and when they're adults, I'll be their friend. But right now, I'm their parent. So
But
that is a
remember,
much
the
different
principles of
role.
relationship still work as a parent as
Yeah.
they do as a friend. But it's a different role. In fact, in the book, it's 3 sections, right? The first section is 5 pillars of a healthy relationship. The second section is building a strong framework. I liken it to building a house. You need
Yeah.
3 things to have a house that's great. One is a strong foundation, a firm foundation, strong framework, and then a sturdy roof. If you have those 3 things, everything else is decoration and room division.
Yeah.
In the same way with relationships, you want to have a strong foundation. You want to have a good framework. A framework is, how are we going to relate to each other? What direction are we going in together as we relate? And then the last one, the sturdy roof, is kind of what I was just speaking to. That's authority. What kind of authority do you have over your relationship? What kind of protection? True authority is designed to protect. It's not designed to harm or control. True authority actually empowers. And so a lot of people don't think about this. We actually reject authority. I did for years because of my experiences. But what I realized now, by inviting people to speak into my relationships, speak into my life, it's like adding shingles to a roof. And what I've done is I've added a lot of shingles. So people in my life like Licky, like Eugene, like there are other people that I have in my life. I have coaches. I have 2 or 3 coaches I utilize in different areas of my life. Those all add shingles to the roof that protects my relationships.
Right.
And so I have people that I allow to speak into if they see me. I'm going to give you one last story because we're going to run out of time here. When we were leading, had a youth center. One day, whenever we'd get ready in the afternoon, and then we'd have like these big events at night. And when I get scurried around and I was getting, focused on things, I could get a little curt with my wife and kind of get bossy, if you will.
Yeah.
And these 2 15-year-old girls came up to me and they said, "Can we talk to you for a minute?" I said, "Sure." And they said, "You know how all us young people look up to you and Sandi?" "Yeah." She says, "You're making it hard for us to do that." I said, "What?" I said, and she says, "We really respect you guys, but when you talk to Sandi kind of rudely, it hurts our heart."
Ooh.
And Matt, it went like poof, right into my heart.
Yeah.
Now I could have been a leader, said, "Hey, I'm the leader around here. You got to do what I say." And I could be controlling, or I could say, "Thank you for holding me accountable."
Yeah.
And I tell that story because I count those girls at that time in my life as shingles in my roof. They protected my relationship with my wife. And that night, in front of all the young people, I had Sandi stand up and I honored her and I asked forgiveness of her for being mean, like rude and curt with her. And there wasn't a dry eye in the place because they were all resonating with the transparency and the message of that. I tell you, trust equity was built that night with that group. But I wouldn't have had that opportunity if those girls had not held me accountable. Accountability is not holding somebody accountable to what you want them to do. It's holding them accountable to who they say they are or what they say they want to do. Yeah. And those girls did that night. And I am grateful for it. It was a big piece of my healing journey. And so be open. Let people speak into your life. Don't be guarded. Let them speak into your life. And what happens is you create a shed, a roof, a covering over your relationships and over your family that is very powerful. And it'll protect your relationships.
Just beautiful, Mark. Accountability is all about being open to being held accountable to who you say you are and how you want to show up.
Exactly.
There are so many gems that you've dropped in this conversation and that's what this is all about. And I really appreciate you just going down these paths with us. So like I said earlier, we were going to look up at the clock and realize, wow, we're 40 minutes. So we're like 43 minutes into this conversation. And I know, no, sorry, please. No, this could keep going on. But, I want to be respectful of your time as well. So we're going to do the last part here today is we're going to jump into my time machine. We're going to go back 10 years and you get to give yourself one piece of advice. What would you tell that younger self?
I would probably tell that person to take more time with relationships that are important to me. I think that, you've heard the old saying, when you die, you're not going to regret that you worked too much or that you're going to regret the time you lost. And so that I would probably tell myself to actually enjoy the ride a bit more, to relax and enjoy the relationships that I have. And so that would probably be my advice, because I think I'm there now, but I would have liked to have been there even 10 years ago, a bit more.
Great. I love that piece of advice. Well, Mark, is there any plug that we can give for you right before we let you
go? Hey, I'd love for you to get my book, only because I know it's going to bless you and help you. It's very, by the way, it's not, you can attest to this, Gene, it's not written from any kind of religious standpoint at all. But it is principles, and it's very simply, I need things simple, so I tend to speak and write simply. And so that would be great. You can go to my website, markgordon.ca, and there's all kinds of things on there you can look at, but including to order the book. And it'll give you lots of different choices. You can order, ebooks, paperback, hardcover from Amazon and Freeze and Press and all different places. All your choices are right on there. And so, I'd love for you to pick up a copy of my book.
Perfect. Well, Mark, thank you so much for being this guest today. It was a
Thank
great
you.
conversation, and I really appreciate it. And to
Thank you,
everybody
Gene.
else, thank you for watching. As always, I'm Gene, the Enjoyment Coach, and next week we have episode 49. We are on the march to episode 50 on August 4th, which is
Wow.
going to be great. So it's a huge milestone. So I have our first guest that was ever on the show coming back for number 50. So
That's
we're going
awesome.
to take it from there. And everybody else, have a great week. We'll talk to you next week on Wednesday.